There's a law at work in your life right now. It doesn't ask for permission, it doesn't negotiate. It doesn't judge whether you believe in it or not. It simply responds. Most people think they don't see results because they lack luck, opportunity, or money. But the real reason is much quieter. So subtle it goes unnoticed for years, while dreams are postponed and frustration mounts. What if I told you this law has always been at play in your life? Even when things went wrong, the law of attraction doesn't pick and choose individuals. It responds to states of being. And that's precisely where almost everyone gets confused. People believe they don't see results because they didn't ask correctly, or didn't visualize enough, or haven't yet found the right technique. But the law has never been concerned with what you ask for. It responds to who you are at the deepest level. You might say you want to prosper, but if, when you think about money, your body reacts with tension, fear, or guilt, that's the signal you're sending out. The law responds to the dominant pattern, not to an occasional intention. It responds to your habitual feelings, to the quiet identity you carry with you every single day. For a long time in my life, I didn't understand this. I worked hard, woke up early, and did everything I was told a responsible person should do. But inwardly, I felt limited. I didn't see myself as someone destined for growth, and my life perfectly reflected that. The effort was immense, the results were meager. Not because the universe was against me, but because I was in harmony with scarcity, not with expansion. Notice how this plays out for most people today. They say they want more, but feel uncomfortable when they receive more. They want to earn better, but feel guilty asking for their worth. They want to prosper, but associate money with problems, family disputes, stress, and loss of peace. How could the law possibly respond differently? Modern studies on human behavior show that the brain reacts to money in the same way it reacts to threats when fear is associated with it. This means that even when an opportunity arises, a person might unconsciously avoid it simply to maintain consistency with what feels familiar. The law merely follows this movement. I experienced this firsthand. There was a phase when, whenever something good started to happen, I'd find a way to mess it up. A delay, an impulsive decision, a giving up disguised as prudence. At the time, I didn't call it self-sabotage, I called it reality. Today I know it was my self-image in action. The law is impersonal. It doesn't reward effort or punish mistakes. It simply reflects. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, you attract situations that demand struggle. If you see yourself as someone who just survives, you attract only enough to keep surviving. And this explains why so many people say, the harder I run, the more I seem to stay in the same place. There are clear examples of people who understood this early on. Oprah Winfrey didn't start by changing the world. She started by changing how she perceived herself within it. Before any external achievement, she built an internal identity consistent with the life she wanted to live. The law responded to this coherence. But there are also examples on the flip side. People who achieved fame, money, and recognition quickly, without ever adjusting their own identity. Many lost everything because, internally, they never felt they belonged at that level. The law doesn't sustain what the mind rejects. Here's a simple, uncomfortable truth. The law of attraction is working for you 24 hours a day. When something isn't working, it's not because the law failed. It's because it was too precise. Look at your life now. Observe the patterns that keep repeating. The same financial struggles, the same limitations, the same emotional cycles. That's not bad luck. That's internal consistency. When you understand this, you stop fighting the world and start adjusting the source. Because the moment you change the internal state from which you think, feel, and decide, the law has no choice but to respond differently. You're not attracting what you desire. You're attracting what aligns with who you believe yourself to be. And until that belief changes, the response will remain exactly the same. There's a point where effort ceases to be a virtue and becomes a trap. Most people never realize when they cross that line. They believe that if they work harder, sacrifice more, or just endure a little longer, life will finally reward them. But effort by itself doesn't create real change. It merely amplifies the pattern that already exists. I lived exactly like this for years, working hard, taking whatever came my way, accepting anything. On the outside, it looked like responsibility. Inside, it was survival. My problem wasn't a lack of action. It was a problem of internal direction. And until that changed, nothing truly changed. See how this manifests in everyday life. People who wake up early, face traffic, work all day, arrive home exhausted, and still live worried about bills. Have you noticed how many of them say things like, "Money slips through my fingers," or "As soon as it comes in, it goes out"? This isn't a lack of effort. It's an internal pattern that neutralizes any progress. Research on financial behavior shows that people under constant stress tend to make more impulsive decisions, even when earning more. They spend to alleviate tension, postpone planning, and confuse momentary rest with a deserved reward. The result is predictable. The more effort, the more exhaustion. The more exhaustion, the less clarity. There was a pivotal moment in my life when this became clear. I was employed, had stability, but felt trapped. It wasn't a bad job. It was an identity too small for who I was beginning to become on the inside. When I decided to leave and open a cleaning business, many people thought it was crazy. I had no formal education, no business history, no guarantees, but I was no longer operating from a place of fear, and that made all the difference. In the first year, that business generated more than $100,000, and this didn't happen because I sacrificed more than before, pulled more all-nighters, or worked myself to exhaustion. I was already doing that. The difference was internal. For the first time, the effort came from a different place. I was no longer trying to prove anything to anyone or escape scarcity. I was building with intention, clarity, and a new perception of who I was. The same actions took on a different weight because the identity behind them had changed. I made decisions with greater firmness, negotiated with more calm, and didn't accept deals that didn't make sense. There was no desperation, there was direction. And when effort aligns with identity, the law of attraction responds naturally, without resistance. It wasn't luck. It was coherence. Most people today do precisely the opposite. They try to change their lives while holding on to the same identity. They want different results, but continue thinking, feeling, and deciding from the same place. That's like pressing the accelerator with the handbrake pulled. If this is making sense so far, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. This simple gesture is what allows this type of content to continue existing and reaching people who are trapped in precisely this cycle of effort without reward. When you do this, you're not just helping the channel, you're participating in the expansion of this message. There are clear examples of what happens when the internal pattern doesn't match the external. Many winners of large financial prizes end up in debt just a few years later. Studies show that most return to the same financial level as before, not because there wasn't enough money, but because the identity remained the same. The effort to earn didn't compensate for the lack of internal alignment to sustain it. This happens on a smaller scale every day. People who receive a raise and shortly after face the same difficulties. People whose income improves, but whose emotional state deteriorates. The problem was never the amount of money. It was always the internal point from which they operate. Here's the truth almost no one wants to hear. Working harder doesn't elevate you to a new level. Only a shift in consciousness does that. The right effort emerges after the internal change, not before it. When you understand this, you stop taking pride in exhaustion and start valuing clarity. Because prosperity isn't the fruit of exhaustion, it's the fruit of alignment. And until that alignment happens, all extra effort merely keeps you exactly where you've always been. Your self-image is the command center of your life. It dictates how much you allow yourself to earn, how much you accept receiving, how worthy you feel of opportunities, respect, and growth. It functions like an invisible thermostat. When something external tries to exceed the level you consider normal for yourself, you unconsciously find a way to reduce, delay, or lose it. For many years, I carried an extremely limited internal image. I didn't see myself as intelligent. I didn't see myself as capable of leading, teaching, or prospering. This perception didn't shout in my mind, it whispered. It appeared in small choices, in repeated patterns, in the kind of life I accepted as realistic. Even when opportunities arose, something inside me would say, "This isn't for you." And the truth is, as long as that identity doesn't change, It doesn't matter what happens on the outside. A person might even rise for a while, but soon returns to the level they consider comfortable. Research in behavioral psychology shows that people tend to maintain consistency with their own identity, even when that identity is detrimental. The brain tends to favor what's familiar over what's optimal. That's why many people claim they want to prosper, yet panic when their income increases. It's not a fear of failure. It's a fear of success that clashes with their self-perception. I recall a particular period when this became acutely clear to me. I'd watch people thriving, and inwardly I felt a peculiar blend of admiration and unease. Admiration for their accomplishments, but discomfort because on some level I didn't feel I belonged among them. It just didn't feel normal to me. And anything that doesn't feel normal is incredibly difficult to maintain. This is precisely why many people earn more money, yet still live with anxiety. Their finances grow, but their sense of self fails to keep pace. They start living in fear of loss, feeling guilty about their gains, and constantly sensing that something will inevitably go wrong. The universal law, in turn, responds to this internal tension by introducing instability. There are powerful examples of individuals who grasped this principle early on. Jim Carrey, long before he achieved widespread recognition, already envisioned himself as destined for remarkable accomplishments. He didn't wait for his external reality to shift before aligning his identity. Instead, he adjusted his identity and internally sustained that vision for many years until the world was compelled to catch up. Conversely, countless artists, athletes, and public figures have rapidly achieved fame and fortune, only to neglect developing their self-image. Many succumbed to excess, accumulated substantial debt, developed addictions, and engaged in self-sabotage. This wasn't due to a lack of talent or financial resources, but because deep down they still perceived themselves as inadequate, insecure, or unworthy. The universal law simply mirrored this internal conflict. Your self-image dictates how you speak, how you carry yourself, and what you tolerate in life. Individuals with a strong, positive self-image don't need to assert themselves forcefully. They simply refuse to accept anything less than what aligns with their true selves. When your identity is in harmony, decisions become much clearer, and anxiety naturally recedes. You don't need to convince the world of anything. The world invariably reflects how you perceive yourself. If you envision yourself as someone who constantly struggles, life will present you with struggles. If you see yourself merely surviving, you will receive nothing more than survival. However, when you adjust your internal image to that of someone who creates and sustains, everything begins to realign. What you are not comfortable maintaining, you will lose, not as a punishment, but as a matter of internal consistency. Understanding alone isn't sufficient. True transformation begins when awareness translates into consistent practice. I discovered this when I ceased attempting to control my thoughts and instead simply observed them, without correcting, without judging. That's precisely when everything began to shift. For 7 consecutive days, whenever thoughts of money or your future arise, simply observe the initial emotion that surfaces. Don't attempt to alter anything. Just observe. When I applied this, my attitudes transformed even before any external results manifested. I began to make better choices and accept less, all with newfound clarity. Most people exist in a state of constant reaction. They react to incoming bills, to negative news headlines, to the curated lives of others on social media. And every single reaction stems from either fear or comparison. Reaction is automatic, impulsive, and invariably perpetuates the same old patterns. Consequently, reaction can never create prosperity. It merely reiterates the past. A conscious response is entirely different. Responding demands presence, clarity, and deliberate choice. When you observe an emotion without attempting to evade it or combat it, that emotion gradually begins to lose its power. It ceases to dictate your decisions in the quiet moments. And the instant your decisions shift, even subtly, your outcomes also begin to transform. Life doesn't merely react to your words, it responds to how you in turn respond to it. There's a silent factor that shapes your daily results, one that almost no one takes seriously: the mental and emotional environment you permit to surround yourself. The law of attraction responds not solely to what you think, but to what you continuously absorb. Conversations, news, complaints, jokes about failure, comments about money being challenging, all of this seeps in, accumulates, and ultimately forms a pattern. During a particular phase of my life, I found myself surrounded by well-meaning individuals who were nonetheless deeply conditioned by a scarcity mindset. Every conversation revolved around problems, how exorbitant everything was, and the immense difficulty of growth. I didn't realize it at the time, but this constant input was subtly shaping my expectations. I might have tried to think differently, but I was spending hours each day immersed in the exact opposite. The universal law responded to what was dominant, not to what was merely occasional. Observe most people today. They begin their mornings by consuming negative news, proceed to compare their lives with those of others, and conclude their evenings by complaining about exhaustion. Then they wonder why they feel unmotivated, anxious, or financially stagnant. It's not a lack of capability, it's mental saturation. Research into human behavior consistently demonstrates that environment influences decisions far more profoundly than sheer willpower. Individuals consistently exposed to negative stimuli tend either to take excessive detrimental risks or to avoid all risk entirely. In both scenarios, growth inevitably stalls. The law of attraction simply mirrors this contaminated internal state. I realized I needed to do something that, at the time, felt radical. I began meticulously filtering what I allowed into my mind, not out of arrogance, but out of a deep sense of responsibility. I ceased engaging in conversations that reinforced limitations. I started deliberately choosing what I listened to, what I read, and with whom I spent the majority of my time. This wasn't isolation, it was alignment. This changed absolutely everything. My thoughts gained clarity, my energy shifted palpably, my decisions became much firmer, and, remarkably, opportunities began to emerge from entirely unexpected places. The universal law didn't respond to the external quietude. It responded to the new internal pattern that quietude had fostered. There are well-known examples of this phenomenon. Figures like Elon Musk have consistently emphasized the importance of safeguarding one's time and attention from unnecessary noise. This isn't some mystical genius, it's profound mental coherence. When your internal environment is clear and unpolluted, the mind naturally creates. When it's contaminated, the mind merely strives to survive. The converse is equally true. Many public figures have seen their lives unravel, not due to a lack of talent, but because they persisted in environments that encouraged excess, impulsivity, and a loss of personal grounding. The universal law responded to that internal disarray, not to their external fame. Here's a simple yet perhaps uncomfortable question. Does the environment you inhabit today reinforce the person you aspire to become, or the person you've simply learned to be? The law of attraction doesn't isolate you from your surroundings. It treats both as a singular, interconnected system. If you're seeking a practical challenge, try this for 7 days. Drastically reduce your exposure to negative conversations, excessive news, and constant comparisons. Replace these with silence, constructive reading, or simply quiet observation. The goal isn't to escape the world, but to recalibrate your internal compass. You'll notice something quite interesting. Your way of thinking shifts effortlessly. Your emotions stabilize, and your decisions begin to reflect more of who you genuinely aspire to be, rather than who your environment was, conditioning you to become. The universal law doesn't respond to your theoretical desires. It responds to the energetic field in which you operate daily. Change your internal and external environment, and life's response will transform alongside it, without struggle, without force, simply through coherence. The universal law has never failed. It has always responded with absolute precision to what has been consistently held internally. The necessary adjustment was never within your circumstances, other people, or your financial standing. It was always within the vantage point from which you observe, interpret, and react to life. When that vantage point shifts, your choices change. And when your choices change, your results have no other option but to transform as well. By altering your point of observation, you don't force reality to adapt. It naturally reorganizes itself to reflect the person you have become. If this message resonated with you, please share it with someone who might be stuck in similar cycles. Sometimes, hearing the right message can change everything. Thank you for being here. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.